T-minus 10, 9, 8. We have a go for main engine start. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, we're here again with Cam, and we're going to talk about some space stuff and the future, and hopefully not get nihilistic and apocalyptic and all those things. So, anyway, Cam.
Well, that's the goal. That's why we do these experiments. So today, I think we're talking about something NASA calls analogs for the most part, which is simulated environments on Earth where we're trying to simulate a scenario for humans to figure out what might happen when we send astronauts to space, psychologically or physiologically, or really just in any given scenario. And it also kind of helps the Houston Control Tower team understand things that they should be able to handle readily, or information that they should know on the spot in case the astronauts need help in space. So, first thing I wanted to talk about today is this analog done 2 years ago, in 2021 actually. It was called HERA, which I believe was the Human Exploration Research Analog. And what that was about is it's just a habitat, so all it is people on Earth, like, living in like a little pod thing, but that environment, that pod, is supposed to simulate what it would be like to travel on a spaceship from Earth to, in this scenario, a moon for Mars. I believe it's, should I get it right, Phobos? I could be pronouncing that wrong, but the idea was it was to simulate travel to basically Mars, and it was a 45-day experiment, so you're locked in this habitat for 45 days, and the neat part and what they wanted to focus on was really the psychology of 4 people being locked in a box. You know, you're acting like you're in space, and as the days go by, so each day, your communication with mission control takes longer and longer. So the idea was by day 45, you know, let's say I say hi to you. So I say hi, and then it takes 5 minutes for you to listen and hear me say hi. And then you can say whatever you want back, but I still won't hear that for another 5 minutes. So I won't know if you even heard me until at least 10 minutes have gone by.
Oof.
So it's simulating the psychology of that scenario where you might be, you know, or in this case, like I could be talking to this mic and maybe it's not picking me up. I won't know until later. But it could be life or death in situations in space. So,
yeah.
So that's kind of the idea there, is they're trying to simulate that psychology of, is everyone going to be okay in those scenarios? How are astronauts going to react? Because it's not like they're not doing this simulation on, well, sometimes they're doing this simulation on normal people, but typically it's people that have like PhD, 2 PhDs, you know, had a serious career in the military, people that have grit, have done some serious stuff. Like, I'm not saying that it can't be for anybody, but right now for doing things that...
Well, they're not going to waste their time on people who don't have expertise in something.
Well, the idea is it's going to simulate what we're actually going to do. And so for our first time sending people that far, we're going to send people that we think can handle it. We're not going to send just, you know, anybody.
So my question to you is, like, why would they go to the moon of Mars instead of Mars itself?
I honestly don't know. I think there's resources of interest on that moon, and I also think it kind of goes along with what we're doing right now, which is, you know, we've got these Artemis missions. The goal is to go to the moon and kind of make a habitat on the moon, and that whole situation is pretty much the next level of simulation. step 2 for, making a habitat on Mars. So I think the idea is we probably follow a similar path where going to Mars, we might try to make a habitat on that moon, or we might make like a sub base on that moon to help with communication with Mars.
Okay.
That's my guess. I'm not 100% certain.
So I guess another question I have is like, so what about their water situation? Like, do they think that there's a vast amount of water on Mars?
Yeah, that's the deal. That's why Mars seems like one of the ideal places for us to explore and actually, have a civilization. It's because we believe, based off of what we know and from drone trips over there, robots and stuff, that the sand on Mars actually has really good accumulation of water. So that's going to be somewhere where we think we could potentially sustain ourselves on that planet.
Okay.
And then the other thing to keep in mind is that, I'll get into that next, is how I said this experiment was for 45 days, and each day communication takes longer and longer until day 45. Communication one way is 5 minutes. So for a back and forth conversation, it's 10 minutes at minimum to that moon. For Mars, they believe the fastest you could communicate from the surface of Mars to Houston is going to be 8 minutes both ways, for a total of 16 minutes. And they believe on average it's going to be closer to 20 for a total of 40 minutes to communicate from Mars to Earth and back. So part of these simulations is about, can we make a scenario, or can we prepare people in a way where they're going to have to be self-sustainable with no help? I have a computer issue on my aircraft or my spacecraft. Can't help you there.
Oh yeah.
Well, if it's like, let's say you're having an issue with the oxygen systems, are you going to have 45 minutes to solve that problem?
Yeah.
So it's about simulating that scenario, because they only know what they know right now.
So they're just trying to prepare them so that they can handle it,
right?
To the best of their ability.
But the idea is, this is research. So like, the idea of this is that we're trying to understand, I didn't think about this. I didn't think about how like this computer issue could cause the whole group of 4 to die, and we can't solve it for them. So we need to make sure on Earth we're training them how to handle this.
Okay, so it's like they're going to take like all their failures, and then they're going to go and do like a hot wash and be like, okay, this is what we learned. And then they're going to keep doing it until they can get like a smaller and smaller margin of error.
Well, that's part of it, yes.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to get into this Haramis analog first, because that leads into what's going to happen later this week, which is a pretty much same scenario, 4 people in a habitat. It's a habitat they believe we would create on Mars, to the best of our ability. And that's going to be 378 days with no outside interference. In theory, there's a safety team if things go horrendously wrong that can react on the spot, but the goal is they're in that habitat, 4 people, 378 days. The only interaction with the outside is, when there's communication with the control room, which is going to happen on a 16 to 40 minute interval for back and forth conversations.
Wow. Do you think like, a solution to that, I guess, would be if they had like kind of like a Starlink like system where they could have like a stream of repeaters that could maybe expedite their communication?
It's possible. So it's kind of, I feel like that's kind of part of why we're developing what we're developing now, because the current space station is going to eventually be obsolete and come down, but they're making the next version of it, and I believe the idea for that was we're going to send that a little bit further out.
And it's like kind of like a hub where they can like walk around, get their bearings together, get back on it, like replenish their stock and like
honestly, basically like an airport in space. That's
Yeah.
the idea.
Mm.
And I feel like part of that would be to have a cutoff point for the communications so that in a scenario where there's a serious emergency, you have a halfway point to talk to. There's somebody to talk to quicker. So, they could relay the emergency from their end, but then you still have somebody that, let's say it's halfway between Mars and here. So
your communication could be a lot faster with
your
them.
communication with them could be
That's what I'm getting at, something along those lines.
quicker. You could feel like you're not alone while you're slowly dying in space. But
yeah,
I think the idea, like, there's good ideas on, like, having a communication system in place to try to relay communications faster and to make it so that there's an infrastructure for when things go wrong.
Okay.
Let's see, what else do we want to get into? So, all of that leads into what I really wanted to talk about, or what you really wanted to talk about today.
Go for it.
Which was, so the next one coming up, it's the Crew Health and Performance Exploration Analog. That's the 378-day event that we're talking about, where they're going to stuff 4 people in a basically 2-bedroom apartment size building.
Yuck.
To try to simulate being on Mars.
It's gonna be like Big Brother, but for NASA.
I mean, I don't understand why they don't just make it a live TV show, because it's gonna be a whole year anyways.
They could probably like help fund their operation.
Seriously.
With like ad revenue.
So here's what's crazy about it. So the building itself was 3D printed, and yeah, because their thought was, how would we make structures in space like that fairly easily?
Dude, have you seen the ones where like it's basically like a multi-axis 3D printer, but they use like cement and it just like goes around?
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Just like a 3D printer.
Yeah, so that's pretty much exactly what they did. Big thing there is, guess what color the building is?
What color is it?
Red.
Why did they do that?
Because the sand on Mars is red. So
they wanted it to be like...
The thought process was that if you're going to make structures on Mars, you're going to make it with the regolith that's already there, like the rocks and the sand, and it's all red colored. So they wanted to monitor the psychology of, well, are they going to go nuts in a red building?
Oh, okay.
Stuff like that.
Okay, that's fair.
So those are things like, so like it's an experiment, so they don't know what's going to happen. They just have an idea in their mind of, this is what we want to try, and there's a purpose behind it, because they're like, this is what we think you're going to come across when you get there. And honestly, the same thing happened when we did the moon missions, like,
yeah,
we went to desert sands and we were just like, this is what we think you're going to come across.
So, all right, that brings up a question, and I don't mean to get super tinfoil hat, but so do you believe that the moon landings really happened?
Yeah.
Okay, why?
I would say, so a lot of it has to do with how much work my company's done on all of that stuff.
Okay.
We've made the spacesuits from the beginning. We've known of all the failures. We were involved with, we built the first spacesuits. So the spacesuits they used, we made them, we sent them, they got used, they came back worn, we repaired them, so on and so forth. Like, could they have? Maybe, but...
I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer here.
Yeah.
I was just wondering what you thought.
I mean, I just think from my perspective, what I've seen at work, like what I've worked with, we've definitely been. I think it's honestly a miracle that we've gone and come back. Because I've heard so many stories about how many things have gone wrong in that whole process, like how there's so many errors popping up on the modules and stuff.
Because you were saying like what country did you say like tried to go to the dark side of the moon, and then like they just China did, and then it was just like they lost contact with them, or like they just crashed it into the...
Yeah, because what happens is, like, on the dark side, you've got the whole moon in between you and your radio communications. Dude,
I was reading, like, I guess like Pink Floyd was saying like how they named their album Dark Side of the Moon, but like the whole irony of it is that they were saying that every part of the moon is dark. It's not like there's like a light side or a dark side. It's just our perception.
I mean, I guess, because moon doesn't... Maybe I don't understand.
I didn't read too far into it,
Yeah.
but I just read about like how that was the whole thing about that album, and like they call it the dark side of the moon, but technically the whole moon is dark.
Yeah, I guess. Because it can only be, either whatever direction sunlight's reflecting off of. I don't get it.
That's fine.
So, let's get back to this new exploration analog.
Right.
So we can have some nice things. So, on top of the 2-bedroom apartment that we're stuffing 4 scientists inside of, we've got a 1,200 square foot Mars surface simulation in there. And on top of that, I guess not on top of it, but just along with it, there's a treadmill set, a VR setup, because they want to simulate missions in that area, like for example Mars walks per se.
Yeah.
And they want to simulate it over more than 1,200 square feet. So they're going to use a treadmill and VR to do that.
So do they think that these people are gonna go crazy? Like, are they like, do they have like an over and under of what they think's gonna happen?
That's honest to God on this one. That's one of the things they're most nervous about, and I 100% believe part of why they're doing this is NASA's biggest fear, I think, in going to Mars is mutiny.
Mutiny? Like, what do you mean?
Like, same thing with like ships and pirates back in the day. It took 3 months to cross the sea. So you get sick of the leader, or you get sick of whoever's telling you what to do, and you just go rogue.
And you have to have a leader, though, right?
Yeah. But that being said, so you're talking to mission control, and then eventually, if you get to a point where you're just losing it and saying screw you, you're not working together, serious issue comes up. That's the type of scenario that they're concerned with.
And do you think that's like part of the human condition to be like that? Because it's happened so many times, like, and it's like something that's repeatable.
From the primitive aspect, yes. I think that's part of being an animal, generally. But I think what makes us special is we've got that neocortex, and we have the ability to.
Is that pulling away from you?
Might
I think it is.
Makes for a great janky podcast.
Oh, all right, yeah. All right, go.
What were we talking about?
We were talking about mutiny, and then we were talking about, people inherently going crazy because it's like part of the human condition.
Right. So I'm thinking, we've got the neocortex thing going on that other animals don't. So we have that ability to use logic and reasoning, and part of what make us the apex predator is our ability to work together. And I was actually reading about books, this book called Burn that's, just studies like groups of people that are still in tribes, like they don't want anything to do with like modern civilization. And it's always been true throughout history that when somebody gets overly violent or overly dominant in that group, the rest of the group typically takes out, kills, does whatever.
The violent, overly assertive one?
Yes.
Okay.
So my point being is, as humans, we're kind of the apex predator because we know how to work together with each other without getting violent with each other, or at least we've gotten better at that over time.
Yeah.
And that's the goal moving forward. And one of the big concerns that I think NASA may have is either mutiny or just that fear, because especially in this day and age where you've got instant gratification, that delay in communication could just lead to catastrophic issues.
Okay.
So one of the things, I'll give you a good example. One of the things they're thinking about right now before the experiment even starts is like technical support for a computer issue. Like how do they handle it and how do they want to handle it? And it sounds like no big deal. Like if someone's got a question, they can ask it. But at the same time, if you have a full mission schedule for a day, you have 30 minutes planned for a task, and somebody suddenly has they can't log into their computer or whatever, and it takes,
to have redundancy.
Yeah, it takes 15 minutes just to talk about that, so that task is gone now.
Yeah, so you pretty much just have to have redundancy, and even that could fail, but like that's basically, they're just gonna have to like run the piss out of whatever they're doing until like they are confident that will be good enough for what they're doing.
But those are the type of like accumulating survival issues that they want to talk about, because, for example, one of the missions that they're going to simulate during this habitat is really like dust cleanup. So having solar array setups and then having accumulation of dust on the solar arrays that are going to have to be cleaned up over time. If you have communication issues, or if you're not keeping up with that, you're going to lose power.
So it's going to be like a regiment where they're going to have to go and like clean the stuff off every so often, because if they don't, that's called periodic maintenance.
Right.
Yeah, so I know all about that because I do that all the time for my job.
But do you do it with an oxygen tank tied to you and a limiting schedule?
Oh, I mean, obviously not, but yeah,
so
I understand.
Those are the things they're thinking about, because, for example, with spacewalks, like our current spacesuit, you typically, like, at the maximum, you have 8 hours out there on a spacewalk to do what you need to do, and the limiting factors right now, pretty sure, are carbon dioxide related for the most part. And so going forward, we might have an improvement on that, but to what extent? And then if you have any issues or questions come up, that's going to eat out of your time outside of the habitat, or just outside of your little pod on Mars.
Yeah, hopefully they have like, little ropes or something that they can like, if they go so far out, they can just freaking pull on the rope and get back to, or something like that, like a winch system or...
Yeah, well, like that's what the space station has, is they've got little like kind of, on a submarine you probably have like little metal ladder pieces.
Yeah, I don't know how that works.
Yeah, they're just little handlebars and you just grab them everywhere. That's basically what they are on the space station, because you can't use your legs at all. But that leads into another thing. So they have an exercise room, because you're going to have to exercise, because having less gravity means your bone density goes down over time.
Yeah.
So you got to counteract that, as we know from the space station.
Mm-hmm.
So...
And even then, even though they exercise, isn't it like they still have problems with atrophy when they come back to Earth?
Oh, there's all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, like they're still really frail when they come back. Even
it modifies your DNA.
Whoa.
Because we've spent so much time in space, we've had an astronaut spend a year on the space station, and it slightly modifies you for a period of time. But the good news is...
So your DNA has to go back to normal?
Yeah, it changes a little bit.
But it changes back.
Yeah, well, that's the good news I was going to say, is it seems like after a period of time, your body adapts. Humans are really adapting.
So if you stayed out there too long, what happens to your DNA? Like, do you just, like, eventually unravel?
I don't think so, but I don't know.
I mean, I feel like that's a good question.
But
I would want to know.
So they've definitely done research on stuff like that, and they found differences. And that's some of the stuff they're looking into.
So do they think they can eventually make like a greenhouse effect on Mars so that like it becomes like self-sustaining, kind of like Earth is? Is that the goal?
That's the goal. The goal is autonomy, because that communication distance is going to be a massive struggle. But on top of that, we believe Mars has the resources to sustain life. So
now, if the gravity is less on that, like, does that just mean that the atmosphere will be higher up in altitude, or is that just like, how does that work? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Not quite.
Well, you know how, like, all right, so if gravity is the thing that holds everything within a certain range, hold on, that's happening. Dude, we gotta fix that for real. Hold on. We're back. We're back. Okay, so, yeah, DNA.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with that. I assume we're going forward because we feel like it's not going to be a serious issue.
Okay.
I think, again, we're going to Mars. We're trying Mars because it is the most similar planet close to us, and we think it's close enough that we can make life happen on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that can be just our beginning of learnings for, exploring the final frontier.
I think that's crazy how like there are things that go on Earth that we don't really think about. Like like nobody cares about where their trash goes. They just care that their trash gets picked up and that it goes out of sight, out of mind. And then if you think about the movie Wall-E, like it was like Disney's way of like trying to push those issues back at us and be like, hey, like this is what Earth's gonna look like, you know, on a long enough timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was crazy. And like how they envisioned that we'd all be on like a giant cruise ship. It was like pretty satirical that like everyone's just like fat and can't walk and like just drinks like milkshakes all day and that's all they do.
Mm-hmm.
So like I don't know, that's kind of like what I envision is like all the different ideas of like, you know, what life in outer space and in the final frontier is going to be like.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you know, like you've seen Gundam, right? And you've seen how like they have like these weird gravity setups where like they have like the rotation of like a giant space station and like people are living upside down from the other people, and like I thought that stuff was super cool, like just thinking about like how that could be a reality.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's our great escape before Skynet takes over with our new AI setups.
I heard, yeah. So I heard that AI is not even where it needs to be for that. But I remember like seeing a little subtle hint of all these people who are like high up in the science community, like signed like a declaration saying that, you know, do not pass go with AI to this extent. And I thought that was crazy because, like, you know, obviously, you know, there's somebody out there with enough means and resources who's going to obviously push the envelope of AI so that they can have a leg up on everybody else. And, like, how many movies were made, you know, talking about, like, what that will end up being. You know, like, so many freaking movies, like The Matrix, Terminator. There was that movie in the 80s that I think it was called War Games, and it was about, like, nuclear simulations with AI. You know what I mean? Like, they already kind of do that as it is. Like, they already do like war simulations of like, you know, that basically calculates attrition out for them in a projection, and I think that's nuts. Like, honestly, like, so I don't know, we're getting off topic, but
no, I get it. But I think the overall, so kind of branching off of what you're saying though, I think the overall goal of going to Mars, building an environment there, is if we can do that, because Mars is a blank slate, then if there's issues here, we know how to counteract them, because we can take our lessons learned from creating our own environment on Mars and create an environment here as needed.
oh
I
man,
think that's the truth.
almost like there's gonna be like the next like revolution, like New England.
I guess just like say you know, who know, like maybe there's global warming, maybe there's not, maybe it's just that time in a period of time where, you know, X temperature is the global temperature.
I think it's crazy how no one can have a definitive answer on that, and I don't know if that's like because people are.
It's crazy because there's so many factors.
Well, that's just it. It's just because like I know I saw something about like was it the Earth's poles are like shifting, and like people are saying that also us extracting groundwater from Earth has caused the Earth to change its angle of axis. And I think that's crazy too, because like, what does that really mean, you know, in the grand scheme? Does that just mean that a different part of Earth is gonna like have a better climate than they did before, and then another part of Earth is gonna have a worse climate because they're technically gonna be like the new equator? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it. Because like, if you think of it, maybe like the giant asteroid that hit Earth, if it never did, the climate necessary for us to exist may have never formed.
Wow.
You know, like.
So this is a crazy thing that people don't take in perspective is like, so with plants, like plants' resilience to heat is directly correlated to carbon dioxide content. So plants can absorb, like if they get like a high saturation of carbon dioxide, it makes them 30% more resilient to outside factors like temperature. So like plants, like say they wanted to be in like 70-degree weather or like 80ish degree weather, like can now go up to like 95-degree weather and maybe a little bit more, and they'll be fine. Only if they have the carbon dioxide to basically, it's like steroids for plants. And like, so back in the day when there was lots of volcanoes and like activity and like all that, plants flourished because they basically could like compete with disease. They could deal with the heat and the humidity and all that.
Yeah. Other thing too, can you remember the last major volcanic eruption? Probably on land, because I've heard of one underwater that may have raised the Earth temperature for a bit.
That's wild.
Because it was a super volcano, or I don't know.
It was
there was some volcano underwater that had such an eruption that it released like a significant amount of water vapor into the air, and the projection that there was global temperature would increase by 2 degrees for like 2 to 5 years.
Dude.
So there's stuff like that, but also on land, if a volcano goes off, like a major volcano, the ash from it cools the earth. So like there's so many factors.
Yeah, and like that's so crazy. So like I think the crazy thing, like when I was an aircraft mechanic, I remember that was like a huge thing. Like, so if like a plane flew where a volcano erupted, like it was kind of like a big deal because like the air quality was so poor that the engine intakes were just taking in like volcanic ash. And so they had to do like an inspection or like even wash the engines to make sure that the engines didn't have like all this residue built up that was going to affect its performance.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why they kind of had this stay indoor advisories for the Canadian wildfires.
Dude, I don't watch the news, and I remember like going to work and then just seeing this like everything being like all smoky, and it just reminded me of like Silent Hill.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, that's so wild.
I came back from Houston with my car covered in ash, and I was like, oh, that's great.
That's so crazy.
But anyways, back to our original topic. Do you remember what it was? I can barely remember.
We were talking about Mars and the atmosphere on Mars, and then we talked about the political environment of Mars being hopefully better than the political environment on Earth.
So I think the last thing I was talking about was dirty air in the form of a simulated mission for covering the habitat, particularly the solar arrays, for a Mars habitat and making sure that was cleaned, and the challenges with getting all of that under wraps and making sure communication with mission control in Houston happens in a timely fashion, and that the 4 people that are in this environment can be autonomous and self-sufficient. Hopefully that works out. We'll find out.
Yeah.
Find out in a year.
I'm going back to like this whole thing that we were talking about, like making it like a reality TV show.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that would make the ultimate reality TV show. And also something that like I would like to know more about is like them taking poops in Mars, like
it's gotta be easier than on the space
like I wonder if they're using like incinerator toilets or if they're just like ejecting that shit just out into outer space. Like like what are they doing? Like,
so on the station, I don't know what they do with it.
Are they gonna reuse it for like fertilizer or something and like revitalize it somehow? I don't know. Like,
I mean, probably. I suspect they would. I don't know what they're gonna do for this simulation. They have NASA on their website has a time lapse of the habitat, including. It was a big deal that they chose 2 bathrooms for this one. Because there was a long debate of...
Oh, they didn't want to have 3?
Really? Really?
Anyway.
It's a long debate over whether or not, like the psychological aspects of 4 people, 1 bathroom. Family not killing themselves.
Oh, that's wild. Yeah, like what happens if 2 people have to take a shit at like the same time?
They went with 2 bathrooms. That's what happened. So they're gonna give that a try. They looked pretty normal toilets to me. Check it out and check out the time lapse on the NASA.gov website.
Ooh.
You can find out
Do you think that we could actually find the toilets if like we were to Google it?
I mean, I know where the time lapse is.
Yeah. Hold on.
Oh, those are better pictures than I've seen.
Do you think if I click on one? That is exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah. So it's I want to show.
Anyway.
So that's the 3D printing
Oh.
of the habitat. Zoomed in a little too close and then out to the point where you can actually see it.
Okay. So there's that. Okay, hold on.
Those are the beds.
So this is where they're going to be living.
Yep.
Right there.
That whole
And this
thing.
is what the inside of it looks like.
Yep. It's basically the size of a 2-bedroom apartment.
I hope they gave them TVs and like
They
video
did.
game consoles and stuff.
I don't know about the video game
Well,
consoles,
then
but
that's silly if they didn't do that.
if the TV's pretty big, so they should have something. Room, exercise room,
Alright, so
medical area, kitchen. They'll have a rec space.
there has to be more images than just this,
Yeah, well,
right?
I got what I'm talking about is from the time lapse.
Oh, okay, so I gotta find this time lapse
Yeah.
is what I'm. Alright, let's see. Whatever. Anyway, that was cool. What's next?
What's next? Well, we talk about
Ooh, they have a. We can show them how they 3D print it.
sure.
Let's do that.
Yeah, it's usually there.
Wow. Okay. Hit me with what's next.
I think we're gonna start wrapping it up,
Okay.
at least for what I want to say. So, again, we're looking at all these factors. The goal is really to understand physiologically, psychologically, how this is all gonna affect the 4 people inside. They're pretty smart people. They all either have like PhDs or they're engineers or they're in the military, stuff like that. Looking at how that time differentiation is going to affect them, the time lag between communication from habitat to mission control and back, as well as water and dietary restrictions. Those are all going to be factors, along with a probably very hectic schedule.
Do you think that there's a chance that there will be unprofessional relationships?
Unlikely.
Or-
Given
I feel like they might want to like figure that out. Like,
that's honestly, it's probably something that's either they've thought of or they haven't thought of.
They-
That's part of why
they
do
find
this
like 4
experiment.
people who are absolutely unattracted to each other, but then over time they increasingly become more attractive to each other because they haven't touched anyone in like 300
Yeah.
days.
It's possible. I mean, I don't know how they handle that. I'm sure NASA has a way of handling that.
Yeah, like sexual suppression medication,
Well,
T blockers.
Maybe, I don't know. It could be with the food supply they choose. It could be like.
Wait, what is it? Saltpeter? They put saltpeter in like prison drinks to keep people from getting aroused.
Just like depending on your diet, like it could affect, you know, your hormonal
Your libido.
level. Yeah. Or therapist talks. I don't know.
You think therapy will stop people from wanting to have sex?
I don't know. Did you hear about the one astronaut that I know of that kind of got a bad rep for she was in a relationship. I think she was married?
Oh, the one who drove from like, it was either she drove from Florida to Dallas or vice versa. I can't remember what it was, but her husband was cheating on her, and so she strapped on a diaper and then she drove across, like did not stop, like just kept going, like pooping her pants all the way to her destination to like.
What?
You didn't hear about that?
I don't know anything about that.
Oh man, yeah, and like so she went to go confront her husband, and yeah, she put like Depends on, and then just drove super far and like nonstop to go find him.
No, I think there was one astronaut who she was in a relation, like she was either getting divorced while on the space station or something, and so she was checking her spouse's bank account or something like that, and that came up in like court documents or whatever.
Oh,
and it kind of
man,
it got into, like, for what I understand, it got to be a big issue because like now you're requesting information from NASA and for a divorce case or what.
Oh, like yeah, like so she's like basically doing like an illegal subpoena of information by using resources like she shouldn't be able to use, because that kind of like goes against the grain of like, you know, privacy of information.
I guess maybe something like that.
Definitely,
like
100%. It's totally like
so,
not something people are supposed to be able to do, but
right. So basically it was just the equivalent of like going on your laptop here and accessing like significant other's bank account, but
yeah,
without permission.
Yeah, I shouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah. So but just NASA got involved because it happened from the ISS, I hear. So
I have a similar situation to this that I wasn't a part of, but I knew this person. I don't want to give too much information up because I don't want to like invade that person's life too much, but they were on a trip. They went to Germany, and while they were in Germany, they had put a GPS module on their spouse's car without telling their spouse. And then so this person was tracking their spouse on their phone and saw that they had like checked into like a hotel, and like I guess I don't know how the person did it, but they found out, like I think they had asked like, you know, how many people were there or whatever, and it was him with like some other girl. I guess like her husband liked to gamble, and it's like so he would go to the casino, so it's not really out of the question that he would get like a hotel. But yeah, so she caught him.
Oh.
Yeah, so that stuff happens all the time. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's life.
That is life. Well, anyway, Cam, thank you for coming, and thank you for having this awesome discussion about Mars exploration and or maybe lack thereof, depending on if these people kill each other on a long enough timeline.
I tell you, in a year we're gonna learn something. I don't know what, but we're gonna learn something. And I forgot about this. So the goal was they're gonna do this for a year. Once they're done, take all that information. 6 months later, probably different people. Do it again.
Well, let's wish them luck.
Yeah, they're gonna need it.
Take care, everyone.
See you.